Hi everybody. So in this video I'd like to introduce you to LaTeX, the typesetting program that is used a lot in math and science. And as you can see here, I'm starting out with Microsoft Word, which everybody is familiar with Microsoft Word, and Microsoft Word is great. Microsoft Word is probably going to be the program that you use way more than 90%, all right? Microsoft Word is so great at doing so many things. But there are some limitations to it, and that's where LaTeX is going to come in. And so I thought I would start out, and this is going to be the first in a series of videos about LaTeX. And in this video, I just kind of want to show you why I care about LaTeX and the way that it does things. So I'd like to start just in Word. And so obviously this is leading up towards typing math and scientific type equations. But let's change the subject for a little bit. And let's say that I needed a rectangle. Right? And Microsoft Word has the ability to draw a rectangle. So I'm in Microsoft Word here, and I think I go to Insert, and I can do a shape, and I can say I want to draw a rectangle, and I can draw this rectangle, and there it is. I now have a rectangle. And in so many instances where I need a rectangle on a document, this is going to be totally fine. But there are some limitations to this. For example, if I want to change the size of this rectangle, I can grab onto this lower right-hand corner and try to drag it down, and you'll see that it kind of inches up, right? That I can make it either this big or I can make it that big, but I can't make it any of the values in between. I could make it a little bit longer or back to the short, but I can't make it those values in between. Now, for me, I'm a math teacher, that's probably fine. Like I can't imagine any situation that I would ever be in where I would need a rectangle that was in between those two pieces that were available to me. But you can imagine that if you were involved in graphic design, there would be tons of situations where you would need much more precision than Microsoft Word is going to give you. And this is kind of my argument about LaTeX. Microsoft Word is great for the vast majority of things that you need to do, but then every once in a while, you're going to need to be able to be more precise about the way that you type things. Let me also just show you a couple of things because I have a couple of pre-set up equations that I have done. So for example, this is an equation. It's a compound fraction. I did this fraction in LaTeX, and you can see that it looks great. Like that if this was a compound fraction that ended up in your textbook, that you can imagine that this is exactly what that equation would look like. I would argue that this is a very good looking compound fraction. Okay, so I did the exact same thing in Microsoft Word. And if I put the two of them next to each other, I think that those are remarkably similar. There are some slight differences. The Microsoft Word one, the fraction bars are a little bit thicker, but I don't think that one of these is necessarily better than the other. And this is just using the Microsoft Word equation editor, which we have all used before. And I think that something like this, it looks fine. I don't think that LaTeX is better than Microsoft Word in this kind of example. But let me show you where some of the limitations to Microsoft would be. So I also created a piecewise function. All right, so this is a piecewise function, f of x. I put 3 pieces in there. And again, I would say that this is a textbook quality equation or a format that if you were doing your homework and this equation popped up, you would not look at this and say, wait, I don't understand that, right? It's very clear, things are lined up nicely. So I tried to do the same thing in Microsoft Word, and I made 2 different attempts. This was my first attempt. I could not get it so that the conditions, the x less than -5 and the x in between -5 and 10, I couldn't get it so that they lined up. Now, this may be relatively clear, but I don't think that anybody would compare these two and say that the Microsoft Word version looked as good as the LaTeX version. So I did a little Google search, and I was like, hey, how do you do piecewise equations in Word? And I found this possibility, and basically this was inside of Word. What I did was create this bracket, and then inside of there I created an array. So it was a 3 rows and 2 columns array where I was able to put 2x plus 3 in the first row, first column, and then x minus 5 in the second row, second column, or in the first row, second column. And so I could get this to look similar to this, But I would still argue that the LaTeX version looks a lot better than the Microsoft Word version. I could not figure out in Microsoft Word how to get each one of these things to be left justified the way that it is over here, that all of these are lined up on the left. The only thing that Microsoft Word would allow me to do is to center these equations, right? So again, this is my example about looking at the rectangle, okay? This is pretty good, but if I want to line these things up, I can't do that in Microsoft Word. The last example, which is probably the best example, is this. Here is a system of equations. We have all seen systems of equations, and what you probably never really noticed when you look at a system of equations is how nicely spaced out this is. That I created this so that the x1s are exactly lined up and the x2s are lined up. The fact that the first x2 has a coefficient of 5 and the second doesn't have a coefficient, it's got a coefficient of 1, I created a little bit of space in there so that they were lined up. I wanted the equal signs lined up, and then I got the two numbers. The first one was a 2-digit number, the second one was a 1-digit number, and I lined those up on the on the right side. Nobody is going to look at that and even notice how good it looks because it looks so good. The best that I could do in Microsoft Word was this. Microsoft Word will allow you to line up two equations at an equal sign, but that's it. Those are the only things that you are allowed to line up. So because of the fact that it was lined up at the equal sign, the 22 and the 9 are lined up left justified, which is fine, right? I don't think that over here having the 22 and the 9 right justified is better or worse than it having left justified. The x2 ended up being lined up because it was right next to the equal sign, but then that's it. I can't get those x1s to be lined up. I can't get the plus signs to be lined up. I can't create a little bit of space in there. There is no way, at least, that I could find out how to do this in Microsoft Word. So right there, that's again, the example of the rectangle. I can make a pretty good attempt in Word, but if I really want this stuff to look good, I end up needing to use LaTeX. Now, we should point out that LaTeX is going to end up being a lot of computation. This document that I did here, I'd like to show you the LaTeX programming that I did. This is what the programming was in order for me to create this document. So right down here, this was what I had to type into LaTeX in order to get this equation. So what you can see is, wow, that looks pretty complicated. And that's okay. We've got a lot to talk about. But this is the kind of thing where we are headed to. I do not expect you to look at this and totally understand it because that's what we are going to learn how to do. Kind of one of the ways that I think about the difference between LaTeX and Word is that in Word, if you know a little bit, you can do a lot. You really don't, nobody really showed you how to use Microsoft Word. It's all pretty intuitive. So you know a little bit, you can do a lot. In LaTeX, unfortunately, it's the other way around. If you know a lot, you can do a little bit. You have to know all of this stuff in order to make that equation look like that, and it's totally fine. This is what we are going to end up learning. Before I finish here, I should bring up Google Docs because everybody always wants to talk about Google Docs. I made exactly one equation in Google Docs, and I'd like to show it to you. I did this first version of the equation in Google Docs. And let me just start off by saying that Google Docs, when it comes to equations, is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Let me try to make these so that they're about the same size. In Google Docs, great. It's a great, platform to work together and everything. But when it comes to typing math and scientific equations, it is just absolutely terrible. You can see in Google Docs, whenever you create a compound fraction, this second fraction bar is ridiculously thick. The plus sign is ridiculously thick. Compare this equation to the equation that I did in LaTeX, and I would argue that there is no difference. Or there is no comparison, right? There is no way to say that, well, I'm not sure which one. No, everybody is going to look at that and say that the LaTeX version is a lot better than the Google Docs version. I can spot a Google Docs equation from about 1,000 miles away. It's so easy to see because there's so many things that it does that are just kind of a little bit off. So I would argue that Word is fine for a lot of these kinds of things, and Google Docs is just terrible. Google Docs is great for lots of things, but when it comes to equations, it is just terrible. So this is going to be the beginning of our path to learning how to use LaTeX. All of that code and everything, this is all stuff that I am going to help you along and show you how the best way of learning how to do this so that you can figure out a lot of this on your own.